Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Invest in Distressed Student Debt Through a Self-Directed IRA, presented by Next Generation and Why Refi. My name is Erica Figueredo. I'm the marketing specialist here at Next Generation. And before we get into today's discussion, I want to review some housekeeping items, give you some information about Next Generation, and introduce our speakers. So as always, today's session is being recorded for anyone who doesn't have a chance to make it live, and for those who wish to watch today's session again. So if you're here with us live, it's great to have you. Welcome. And with that, everyone joining today's session will be automatically muted for the entirety of the session, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. So I want everyone to take a minute, locate your Zoom control panel. It's likely at the bottom of your screen. There's two main features that I want you to pay attention to. One is chat and the other one is questions. So if you have any questions during today's session, please use the questions tab. All other conversations, feedback, etc., can go into the chat. And that's where I'd also like for everyone to take a moment and say, hey, introduce yourselves, let us know where you're from and why you're here. And we really want to keep this as engaging as possible, so feel free to chat amongst yourselves. I've also taken the time to enter in our speakers' contact information so everybody has it, but we'll review that at the end as well. So to kick things off and tell you a bit about Next Generation, Next Generation is a custodian and administrator for self-directed retirement plans. So these plans are much like the plans that you would find at a brokerage like Fidelity or Charles Schwab, the only difference being the types of investments that can be held within them. So things like real estate, stocks and bonds, or I'm sorry, not stocks and bonds, real estate, private stock or private equity, and a lot more like cryptocurrency, precious metals, hedge funds, notes and loans. It's very, very broad. What I like to always review is kind of our organizational structure. So we have two main arms of our business. We have Next Generation Services and Next Generation Trust Company. The first is our administrative firm and headquarters, Next Generation Services, which is located in Roseland, New Jersey. Next Generation Services handles all of the back office administration, record keeping, mandatory tax reporting, and transaction support for our client accounts. Next Generation Trust Company, located in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, is a licensed and chartered trust company which serves as custodian for all of our client accounts. And accounts are named with Next Generation Trust Company as the custodian and holder of all assets for the benefit of the individual account owner. So now to give you our very necessary disclaimer on what we don't do. So Next Generation is not a bank or fiduciary, so we don't provide any financial, legal, tax, or investment advice. Next Generation also does not endorse, recommend, or review the merits of any investment. So any information provided on today's webinar is for educational purposes only. And if you feel that this strategy may be something that interests you or something that you might want to try out, we encourage you to consult with your trusted financial professional. So for today's conversation, we have our co-host, Lane Schoenberger, Chief Investment Officer and Managing Partner, along with Angie Margette, Senior VP of Investor Relations, both of them with Why Refi. And alongside them, we have our very own Jack Malpass, Next Generation's Business Development Specialist. So I'll give them a moment to introduce themselves so you can get to know them a bit better. So let's start with Lane. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi there, Lane Schoenberger, Chief Investment Officer, native of Arizona, been here my whole life, married, 4 kids, financial advisor for 25 years, retired to be a part of this amazing opportunity here at Why Refi. So I appreciate everybody taking the time to come in and listen to what we're going to talk about today in student loans.
Thanks, Lane. Over to you, Angie.
Why, thank you. My name is Angie Margette. I'm the Senior VP of Investor Relations with Why Refi. I'm originally from New Jersey. I went to Rutgers University. I have a master's degree in civil engineering. I've been in Arizona for almost 10 years. And for fun, I'd like to do hot yoga in a 130-degree infrared sauna.
Nice. Okay, thank you, Angie. And now over to you, Jack. Tell us a bit about yourself.
I got to follow those two after that.
Right.
I'm Jack Malpass here at Next Generation. I've been with the company just under 3 years now. something like that, Erica.
Yep.
I am business development. I educate investors on what you can and cannot do inside of a self-directed IRA. And we'll be getting into that a little more later. Other than that, I play a lot of sports, and I drink a lot of bourbon and smoke a lot of cigars.
Nice. Thank you, Jack. Okay, so let's get into today's conversation. So, Jack, I'll hand it back to you to get things rolling.
So, Lane, I think the important question here is, what does the current student debt industry look like, and can you provide some insights?
Sure. So thank you, Jack. So student loans is a very complex market, and we'll break it down for you. And basically, let's start at the top and work down. So student loans is a $1.75 trillion problem in this country. Now there's two sides to the student loan coin. You have federal student loans and you have private student loans. In our world of YREFI, we don't deal on anything with federal student loans. Federal student loans are their own animal. We work with the private student loans. It's about a $200 billion market of that 1.75 trillion. And then we even narrow it down deeper, and we're going to focus in our world on the $21 billion distressed private student loans.
Okay, thanks for making the clarification. Onto the elephant in the room. How exactly do borrowers find themselves in trouble?
Sure. So now the question really is, how do borrowers find themselves down this rabbit hole that they can't get out of? And the answer is, when a borrower goes to school, first stop is the financial aid office. Okay. And the first thing that the financial aid officer says is fill out this free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA app. That's to see how much money the government will give that student. And it's based on a bunch of different variables, probably beyond the scope of this webinar. Then it's a question of, okay, the government's going to give you this much money, but you need this much money. So where's the rest of it going to come from? Well, you've got mom and dad, any scholarships or grants, and so forth. And then it comes down to private loans. Now, the private loan industry is your typical banks, Wells Fargo, Citizens Bank, and so forth. So the introduction is made to the individual banker, where the student goes in and they say, okay, I want to be a widget maker, and I'm going to need a degree to do so. And in order to do that, I need to borrow money from you, Mr. Banker. Mom and dad may have to co-sign on that loan, because these are students. They're just getting out of high school and going into college. So they don't really have much in the way of credit at this point. So mom and dad sign off. And it's right here in this point where student loans, they're bankruptcy protected. So this is not an asset that these borrowers can just walk away from in a bankruptcy court. So fast forward, kid goes to school. Now he's done, gets out, and something happens, right? What is something? Well, maybe they didn't get the job. Maybe it took a little longer to get it than they expected, or maybe they actually had to start at the bottom and work their way up. And it turned out they couldn't afford to make their payments. Now, the federal government offers all kinds of programs for forbearance and deferments. And, with COVID, there's all sorts of new programs now. But the private bankers, Jack, they don't do that. The private bankers say, in essence, congratulations, you're done with school. You borrowed $100,000 from us. Here's your coupon book. Your first payment is due in 30 days. Go. Now the borrower's got challenges potentially. Maybe they've made some payments, maybe they didn't, and they're going down this rabbit hole. Once they go down that rabbit hole, there's no way out.
Okay. So what about student loan forgiveness and bankruptcy protection, and why are these important considerations to mention?
Well, in student loan forgiveness, and it's the political hot potato of the day, right? Politicians are talking about student loan forgiveness. And what they're failing to mention in all of those conversations about student loan forgiveness is that there's two sides to the coin. There's federal and there's private. They just out there talking about student loan forgiveness. Well, they cannot forgive private student loans. It's not their money to forgive. That'd be like me saying, hey, Jack, your mortgage, consider it paid off. No one cares until I write that check, right?
Yeah.
These are individual investors, they're individual banks. It's not their money to forgive. On the federal portfolio, though, okay, now that's taxpayer money. It's technically not theirs to forgive, but that's a different conversation. What they do over there is what they do over there. On the private side, they're not going to forgive anything because it's, again, not their money to forgive. On the other side, all student loans are bankruptcy protected. That prevents the borrower from going into a bankruptcy court and saying, hey, I cannot make these payments and walking away. So only Congress can change the bankruptcy laws, and that would take a lot of work, frankly, to get that done.
Yeah, okay, that's very helpful. I know we're here to talk about student debt as an investment opportunity, but how would this type of opportunity help the borrowers?
So in what we do here at YRefi, we work with the borrowers and we put them through a pretty rigorous underwriting process. We make certain that they can afford to make our payment. The process that we put them through, frankly, is similar to getting a mortgage. Part of that process is we're going to require them to prove debt to income ratio, proof of employment, tax returns, pay stubs. We don't underwrite on FICO. Okay, these borrowers are all coming to us with, frankly, decimated FICO scores because they just never got an opportunity to get their financial footing. Mom and dad, on the other hand, well, they've got a better financial situation typically. So as we're putting these borrowers through this process, we also require them to escrow a payment with us so they can prove that they have the ability and, more importantly, the willingness to pay us back. If they're not approved, we give them back 100% of their money. If they are approved, and I'm going to get right to the answer here in a second, if they are approved, we're going to take 100% of that escrow account and we're going to apply it towards principal reduction right out of the gate so they can see they're winning. Then what we do, Jack, is we give them a custom loan. And when I say custom, I mean a low fixed interest rate. I mean a custom term where they can actually afford that payment. So it gets them the ability to actually be able to afford it again, and then it puts them back into good standing.
Sounds like this gives investors the opportunity to participate in something that is for the greater good. Can you describe to our audience what this type of investment might look like and how it may be structured?
Certainly. So what we're doing is, again, going back to that part of underwriting, we're ultimately behind the scenes. We are working to buy that debt for a steep discount, 35 to 40 cents on the dollar, let's call it. We then refinance it to the borrower at 105. So we've got a pretty significant spread that allows us to take care of our investors. With that, we offer our investment opportunity where an investor could put in, they can choose different investment time frames from 1 to 5 years with exceptional fixed returns.
Thanks so much, Lane. I appreciate that. It makes a lot of sense.
My pleasure.
Jack, we had a lot of fun talking about the student debt market and the opportunity for investors. We heard these types of investments can be held in a self-directed IRA. Can you explain to the audience what a self-directed IRA is and perhaps some things that may be misunderstood about them? Sure,
Angie, thank you. First, let's start with the misunderstandings of a self-directed IRA. When self-directed IRAs first came out a long time ago, they were mostly for the rich or the powerful people of the world. And not a lot of people knew about self-directed IRAs. The good thing about them now is that you don't need to be a billionaire or multimillionaire to invest in self-directed IRAs. Self-directed IRAs are different from your traditional IRAs or your Roth IRAs in that your Morgan Stanleys of the world, your Edward Joneses, they deal with stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Okay. In a self-directed IRA, you deal with non-publicly traded assets or alternative assets. Like Erica mentioned in her opening statement, real estate, precious metals, pre-IPOs, hedge funds, distressed student loans. As long as it's not publicly traded on the stock market, it is something that you could possibly hold in a self-directed IRA.
Okay, that's definitely helpful. So we know that self-directed IRAs can hold non-publicly traded alternative investments. Can you provide some examples of the types of investments that can be held in a self-directed IRA?
Sure. Like I said, crypto is something, the only things that cannot, or well, let's stick to what can be, okay? Real estate, pre-IPOs, hedge funds. Let's put it this way, it's endless of what you can do. There's no thing that we won't try to see if it can be held. We do a compliance on every investment to make sure it can be held in a self-directed IRA. So as long as it's not publicly traded, there's a good possibility that it can be held in a self-directed IRA.
Okay, great. It sounds like there's a lot of opportunity there for investors who know what they're doing.
Yep.
So what's the catch? Is there anything that you cannot do with a self-directed IRA?
Sure. With our company, and this is for our company, may differ from other custodians or administrators. The certain things that cannot be held in a self-directed IRA are life insurance, collectibles like art, cars, baseball cards, any kind of collectibles, and cannabis. So those are, and S corps. So if it's not publicly traded and it's not any of the things I mentioned, it's definitely a chance that we'll do a compliance on it and take a look at it, make sure that it can be held.
Okay, great. Now that we know all about the do's and don'ts, how would an investor go about including this type of investment within a self-directed IRA? What's the process?
Process starts with me. Collect your information. I get a little background on the investment itself. Discuss how you are going to make the investment. Where's the money coming from? It has to be some type of qualified retirement plan, whether it's a Roth, traditional, a SEP, HSA, ESA. As long as it's a qualified retirement plan, you can use that money to invest. So that's how you would start. And then once I discuss the investment with you, we go over the application process, and then work with you on moving the money from your wherever your IRA is or wherever your qualified retirement plan is to us. And then once it's with us, we do the compliance on the investment, and then we move the money from the IRA to the investment. So it's a pretty simple stage process. It's pretty much 3-part stage. Usually most investments take anywhere from 4 to 5 weeks from the timeline from beginning to end. And that's pretty much the gist of how self-directed IRA works.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jack.
My pleasure, Ange. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who participated today. I have some follow-up questions for both Lane or Angie and Jack. So to start, for why refi, I know we talked a little bit about federal versus private student loans. So can you perhaps kind of get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty on what are the big differences there?
Well, federal student loans are, it's taxpayer money that the federal government is loaning back to the borrowers. There's an application process called the FAFSA application. There's several components in that application where we determine where they determine how much money they're willing to loan to that student borrower. Again, it's all taxpayer money. Federal student loans are backed. They're in the bond market to about 98 cents on the dollar by taxpayer money. On the other hand, private student loans, it's literally 100% coming from investors and banks. Okay. Pick Wells Fargo, for example, and I think they actually just exited the student loan business. So Citizens Bank, they're making basically a loan to the student to go to school backed by the fact that it's bankruptcy protected. And in a lot of cases, co-signed by mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, someone else with a better credit. Keep in mind, there's no real asset behind it. There's not a piece of real estate or a car. That's why it's bankruptcy protected, because it's all up here. So that's why those bankruptcy wrappers are around student loans. Now, one of the things that we do here to make certain that they were student loans is we always want to make certain that we have the paper trail on that student loan, okay? So that we can confirm that it was actually used for education, not a vacation or to buy a car. It needs to, we always confirm that anything that we loan on is indeed a student loan. Oh, Erica, you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. I
There you
couldn't
go.
get it off, but thank you for mentioning that. I always seem to do that at least once on every single one of our webinars. It never gets old. And then for Jack, I know we talked a lot about the things that you can't do with a self-directed IRA, and it may not apply to every investment, but I think it's important to talk a little bit about prohibited transactions. So can you talk a little bit about that and disqualified people for our audience?
Sure. IRS has certain guidelines on what you can and cannot do with inside of a self-directed IRA. A lot of it, I'm not sure how it would really work in these in the student debt, but there are people who you can and cannot deal with as far as self-directed IRA. If you, like on a real estate investment, you are disqualified from yourself. So, you know, you can go in on a deal as a partnering with yourself, but you can't commingle your money. Okay. Ascendants and descendants are disqualified from your IRA and their IRA. There's no commingling of money with anybody. Okay. As far as prohibited transactions, really comes down to dealing with people who, like I said, are disqualified from you, using your IRA to buy a house to live in, to buy a car. So there are certain qualifications and people who you can and cannot deal with. So it mostly breaks down to family members, ascendants and descendants, some financial advisors, and you know, there's a list, but it's mostly depending on, excuse me, what your investment is and who you're investing with. You could run into some issues, and we definitely go over that with every investment.
You're on mute again, Erica. Hey,
Again,
Jack,
let me
let
go.
me
Jesus.
just-
I won't
Let
do
me-
that again, I swear. Okay,
let me
Jack,
add to
thank
what you
you.
were saying there. Let me add to what you were saying there, Jack.
Okay.
Because prohibited transactions is it's an important topic, right?
Yes.
In our world of investing in what we're doing, it's not a prohibited transaction simply because you're not investing as an investor in any one student loan. You're actually investing in our portfolio of student loans, and you don't know who the borrowers are. Okay, as an investor, we actually have laws that protect what they call PII, or personally identifiable information. So as a lender, we cannot discriminate, right? We've got certain rules we have to follow.
Sure.
So this investment would not be considered a prohibited transaction under the prohibited transaction rules that the IRS puts out. So
that's good to know, because it could put a lot of people at ease.
Important to know.
To this topic.
Right.
You know, it's a lot different when you get into the real estate or pre-IPOs or hedge funds,
right?
Or anybody who's working on LLCs, doing an LLC. So it depends on your investment, and we make sure. Well, we don't make sure, but we do a pretty good compliance on investment and who you're investing with, or with who's involved, who the major players are. So, because the last thing you want is the IRS to distribute your money right back to you. And
right.
That would be no bueno for a lot of people.
Agreed.
Yes. Okay, so we do have some questions from the audience, some of which we can answer live, some of which we may have to discuss offline. But the first question is, how do you engage with investing in distressed student loans? Is this strictly a passive investment?
It would be passive for the investor, yes. And we have an investor portal that you can visit and learn more, and then of course connect directly with Angie or myself. Can I give that investor portal information?
Yeah, sure. We can put that into the chat.
Okay. So you can go there and you can learn more about why refi and how to invest, what you can do, and so forth. And of course, then we're here to answer any questions that you have. But it is passive. You're not involved in as an investor. You're not involved in the underwriting, the loan decision committee. It's an investment that you just get a fixed return on.
Okay.
That's what's really great about self-directed IRAs, is that you can be a passive investor. You don't have to be hands-on for every investment. You just sit back and let the money roll.
Right.
Yep. Okay, so the two questions that will probably be for Y refi that we'll have to discuss offline is how much interest can we charge on the loans, and how do we find opportunities to find distressed student loans? So that is something that Y refi can talk about offline if you want to contact them. But for the other two questions that you have, I think the first one would probably apply to Y refi. They'd like to know what happens if a student defaults on the loan.
Great question. So this is the fun part of what we do, because we love helping our borrowers and watching them succeed. At 5.5 years, our default rate is only 1%. So we have a very, very low default rate, a very high success rate. But to answer your question, we do have an attorney that we send those loans off to, and we do pursue them. They're basically back in the fire, which I hate to do that to people, but I'd rather see them succeed. But at the end of the day, they go off to the attorney and we pursue them for collection.
Okay, thank you. And then our final question for Jack is, can we use our SD IRA for a REIT?
Sure.
And for clarification for the audience, a REIT is a real estate investment trust.
You froze up on me.
Okay, so the question was, can
Right.
you use a self-directed IRA to invest in a REIT or a
Yes.
real estate investment trust?
Yes, yes, you can.
Yes, so long as it's private.
Yes.
So I'd like to extend an invitation for the people that asked those other two questions to reach out right after this to myself or Angie. We do have the answers to those questions, and please understand that we share in that spread with you as the investor. So we're generating some nice fixed returns for you as an investor, and it really is not an effect on the borrower. The borrower is actually given a heck of an opportunity to win, as evidenced by our default rate. So please reach out. Let's have a conversation. I'll answer your questions.
Okay, so with respect to that, we're going to conclude for today. I want to thank everybody for coming and joining us. For those that are joining us either live or watching the recorded session, I do want to get everybody's contact information out there and verbalize it. So if you'd like to speak to Next Generation about self-directed IRAs, you can reach out to Jack Malpass. He's the business development specialist. You can reach him at jackm@nextgenerationtrust.com via email, or call 888-857-8058, extension 128. And if you'd like to reach out to Angie or Lane, we've got Angie, the Senior VP of Investor Relations, at Merget, MERGET, @yrefi.com, phone number 480-258-9297, and Lane Schoenberger, CIO and Managing Partner. He's Lane, LAINE, @yrefi.com, phone number 602-292-6287. So with that, thank you again for everybody joining. Thank you, Lane. Thank you, Angie. And thank you, Jack. And we hope to see you guys on the next one.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Nice to see you guys.
Thank you.
Take care.